people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Terrence Crawford was in Puerto Rico this past weekend for some sort of function with the World Boxing Organization, where they're based out of Puerto Rico, and he has stated that he may move up to super welterweight and fight the winner of Tszyu versus Thurman on March 30th. Tszyu's got a tough fight in front of him with Thurman. Hopefully after that, we can see the next move. We've got a few guys on the roster for my next fight. Tszyu or Thurman is one of them.
Interesting tidbits in association with that fight is that anti-doping expert Victor Conti has made several inquiries as to whether or not there's any anti-doping testing for that fight, and he has yet to receive a response.
Do you get the sense they're letting Keith Thurman go into this thing juiced to the gills because he hasn't fought in such a long time? He's in his mid-30s now.
I wouldn't put it past them.
Could be that, or it could be that they just don't have the money to pay for anti-doping testing, which isn't free. You have to pay for that. Somebody has to. They don't want to fritter away dollars on that when it's not even a title fight anyway, that if they don't have to, they're not going to.
Thurman versus Tszyu is not a title fight, in case you didn't realize.
It's being fought at a catchweight, just above junior middleweight, because the WBO didn't want to sanction this thing. They don't think Keith Thurman is worthy of being fast-tracked to a title shot, having done absolutely nothing as a junior middleweight and having not fought in roughly 2 years. And I agree with them.
I do, but that means if he does the unthinkable and he actually beats Tszyu, he doesn't become WBO champion.
I heard something about the WBO title going vacant in the event that happens. So the question is, does Keith Thurman beat Tszyu? And most people, they don't think he's going to. They think that today's version of Keith Thurman, he's just cashing out. He's just looking for a check.
That's how it looks.
I myself don't have Keith Thurman winning this fight. I don't see what he brings to the table here and now that Tszyu hasn't already dealt with before. In case you haven't realized, Tszyu's already been in there with not one but two former champions, one in Jeff Horn and another in Tony Harrison. Moreover, Keith Thurman's bread and butter, at least in the past, it was his movement, his ability to create space and get off big punches. Well, Tszyu's been in there with not one, but two movers.
A U.S. Olympian in Terrell Gachet and a former champion in Tony Harrison, who I just mentioned.
Those are guys that like to use the ring. Those are guys that like to move around. And those are guys who are more acclimated, more accustomed to campaigning at or around these weights than today's Keith Thurman, who, if nothing else, hasn't fought in a very long time, and that doesn't help his situation. If the goal is to create space and walk Tszyu into punches, well, that relies on speed, timing, and reflexes, most of which Keith Thurman hasn't had to use.
This ain't the fight you shake off ring rust in.
But that's what he's doing. Tszyu is a noticeably bigger fighter than Keith, younger too, stronger, I'd say.
Yeah, he's stronger.
Tszyu racked up 2 knockouts just last year, whereas Keith, when's the last time he knocked anybody out?
Tim knocked out Tony Harrison and Carlos Ocampo. That was last year.
Whereas Keith Thurman hasn't racked up anything semblant of a knockout in about 8 or 9 years. The Luis Collazo fight, where Luis retired on his stool after 6 rounds, I think it was. Needless to say,
It was in 2015.
we're in 2024. It's safe to say Keith Thurman hasn't racked up anything semblant of a knockout in close to a decade, and that was down there at welterweight. This fight, this is basically at middleweight. It's above junior middle, so that makes it middle.
That's better for Tim than it is for Keith. I don't like to tempt fate to jump to conclusions or make bold proclamations, because boxing does have a way of surprising you. But all signs point to Tszyu stopping Keith Thurman. All signs point to Tim potentially retiring him.
Even if he's on a juice, because he might be. There's no VADA testing.
Yeah.
Banned substances didn't help Ryan Martin in the Josh Taylor fight. No, banned substance didn't help Lucien Butte in the Badu Jack fight more recently. Banned substance didn't help Robert Helenius in the Anthony Joshua fight.
It's not a failsafe. It's not a lock.
Tszyu has fire in the belly. He has ambition. The kind of ambition that Keith Thurman hasn't had in years. He's certainly been more active than Keith Thurman. He fought 3 times last year. That's more times that he's seen action that Keith has seen in the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, I think Keith's fought only 2 times.
Strange that a fight like this ends up behind a paywall, ends up being a pay-per-view, and this is the main event.
Seems to be to many all but a foregone conclusion that Tim should be able to get the job done.
If he does, he maybe fights Crawford.
A far more intriguing fight than this one, a far more even fight than this one, because while Tim has youth and freshness and size, Terrence Crawford has the kind of experience and the kind of ability you don't find just anywhere. You don't find everywhere. Terrence is a special fighter, so this fight in many ways, this fight with Keith Thurman, it's the bread before the main course is served. It's little more than just an appetizer.
If he does to Keith Thurman what he did to Tony Harrison, what he did to Carlos Ocampo, if he stops him, he will be the first fighter to have done that. And if he does it in spectacular fashion, well, that does lend itself to a potential Terrence Crawford fight.
Its profile, its marquee value, Tim Tszyu has fought at least once on U.S. soil, but he didn't really make a splash with that fight. You know, dominating Terrell Gausha the way that he did. Very impressive to a hardcore boxing fan, but a casual 4-1, it likely flew under the radar. So going in there and knocking out Keith Thurman, that might make more of a splash, be more of a blip.
Maybe.
Haven't seen a whole lot in terms of promotion for the show, promotion for the fight by way of Amazon or anywhere really. The whole idea of pairing up with Amazon is that their marketing arm reaches so many people, so many homes, and yet seeing so little in terms of promotion. March just started, so we'll see if they ramp up promotion as the month progresses. But yeah, Crawford versus Tszyu, I like the idea of it. All he's got to do is beat an aged Keith Thurman.
Needs to retire anyway.
Guy's a has-been.
He's nothing.
Tim has to show him the hard way. Just in keeping with the theme of all things PBC, Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez on the same card. The planned date for Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin is reportedly June 15th, according to No Smoke Boxing, and World Boxing Council President Mauricio Suleiman revealed that David Benavidez versus Alexander Usyk would also take place on that same day.
What did I tell you last year?
When news first broke that Showtime would be leaving boxing and people at the PBC would be jumping into bed with Amazon, but they would only have about 12 to 14 fight dates to work with, what did I tell you?
What?
I told you that they're going to stuff these cards. They're going to double stuff these cards in an effort to make them more appealing, more attractive.
12 to 14 fight dates is not enough to accommodate 150 to 200 fighters, however many fighters the PBC have left.
So fighters are going to start to float away. That's what I told you last year, and that's what you've been seeing into this year. And what cards they have, what fight dates they have, they're going to double stuff them
with familiar faces.
That's what you're seeing on the Thurman versus Tszyu fight. You're seeing a number of fighters on that card, all in that same card, that under normal circumstances would be headlining their own shows, headlining their own cards in their own main events. To make the card more appealing, they've put them all on the same show, and that card, that's what they appear to be doing with this one. If David Benavidez versus Gvozdyk lands on the same show as Davis versus Martin, it's likely going to be the co-main event.
Is it a good idea?
Yeah, it is. It does make the card more appealing, more attractive. I mean, David Benavidez versus Alexander Gvozdyk is a fight that I like. It's a fight that satisfies what I've been wanting to see from David Benavidez for a very long time. So is it a good idea to put them both on the same show?
Yeah.
Benavidez versus Gvozdyk and Davis versus Martin? It is, but don't forget why they're doing it. They're doing it out of necessity.
They can't afford to split them up.
Remember, these are the same people that build David Benavidez versus David Lemieux as a main event. Comparatively, this is a much better fight than that one was, a more even contest, and yet it's not a main event. Not complaining, I'm just saying. If they finally wised up, it's because they can't afford to waste any more time or any more resources.
They've got to try to make what shows they're doing now as appealing as possible to the consumer, because most of them are going to be pay-per-views.
That means, more often than not, they're going to be charging more to the consumer than everybody else, than all the other game in town, than Top Rank, who doesn't even do that many pay-per-views, than Matchroom, than Golden Boy. They're going to be asking you to go into your wallet a lot more than everybody else, so they have to make it worth your while. Try to, and that's what this is. An effort to do that. Seeing fighters that would normally headline their own shows jam-packed into one show.
Is it going to make a difference?
These are uncharted waters for everyone, really. Amazon is not a platform that people normally go to for boxing. And just because you're on a big platform doesn't mean you're going to draw big eyes or big viewership. Their efforts on Fox are a perfect example of that, and that failed. In spite of being on a big terrestrial network, many of their pay-per-views didn't bring in big numbers. So Could be more of the same on Amazon Prime.
Cards might be more expensive to put on too. When you're putting this many of your headliners, the guys who would normally headline their own shows, you've got to be hoping to bring in big buys to compensate them all. And we don't know if they're going to.
When they're all on the same show, when you're putting this many of what were your headliners on the same card, it will become that much more expensive. And we've seen what Gervonta Davis's numbers were before he fought Ryan Garcia, just north or just under 200,000 pay-per-view buys. Is that number what he's going to be going back to now that he's fighting Frank Martin and not someone who's more popular? And is that number going to be enough to compensate all of these fighters?
I don't know. Like I said, it's uncharted territory.
We'll spice things up by having Big David on the card. His debut as a light heavyweight, his effort to become WBC interim champion at 2 weights, and most of the time that we've broached this conversation, this fight, it's been on the premise that David actually wins, but what if he doesn't?
This will be arguably the best fighter that he's fought. Better even than Caleb Plant. He's got the same number of losses on his record right now that Caleb Plant did.
Caleb's the best guy that he's fought, Caleb Plant. This guy's just bigger, punches harder.
Saw what he did to Adonis Stevenson.
In spite of the polarization of David Benavidez and all these surrounding subjects, what makes the fight intriguing is that David often goes into a fight as a super middleweight with a noticeable size advantage, a height advantage, a reach advantage, usually outweighs the other guy.
Him and Demetrius Andrade looked like they were in 2 different divisions.
Won't have the same physical advantages as a light heavyweight over the other fighters at the weight that he did at super middleweight. Alexander Gvozdyk, he's a big guy, long guy, strong guy, he's got power, and he can move, he can box.
David Benavidez said that because he can't get his hands on Canelo Alvarez, he'll just beat up everybody on his team.
Alexander Gvozdyk just so happens to be trained and managed by Eddie Reynoso, Canelo's longtime trainer and manager. So you see what it is that David Benavidez is getting at. He was unable to knock out Caleb Plant at 168. The same Caleb Plant that Canelo knocked out when he was an unbeaten fighter.
David's bigger, younger, but he couldn't knock him out.
So you think about that, and you think about David's maiden voyage to that division for a former champion in Alexander Gvozdyk, who I reiterate, bigger guy than Caleb, stronger punches certainly.
David didn't fight any punchers as a super middleweight.
Anybody who could really crack, anybody with power, he didn't, even though he was there for 2 cycles of champions, could be a novel sensation if he goes up there at 175 and he gets cracked right on the fucking jaw.
Maybe he wins, maybe he loses.
If he's still standing by the final bell, I think he could get a political decision if he needs one, though if nothing else, that will provide unique insights to Team Canelo.
Remember, he did say he'd be willing to come back down for Canelo.
If he does, the descent could take something out of him, boiling back down to 168 in tandem with Eddie Reynoso having the inside track on this guy, having seen him once before and prepared for him once before. He can relay all that information over to Canelo.
Unique situation.
Even before this place turned into a circus, just based on styles and experience, I favored Canelo to win. If this guy actually comes back to 168 for Canelo, I definitely have Canelo winning. And finally, in men's heavyweight news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Dillian White has now been cleared by the Texas Commission, who he holds his boxing license with, over his positive drug test that caused the Anthony Joshua rematch to be canceled last year. The forensic expert who conducted the investigation concluded White was the victim of a contaminated supplement that did not disclose the contaminant among its ingredients, and he did not ingest it intentionally.
The Texas Commission, huh? Not the British Boxing Board of Control.
It's been really tough because I knew I was innocent, but then you can't talk, you can't say nothing, White told Sky Sports as he explained why he had to remain silent during a lengthy investigatory process. You have to be professional, trust the process, trust the lawyers, and trust the people around you. It's been tough, but tough times make tough men.
People aren't going to buy this, you know.
Because this isn't the first time Dillian White has tested positive for a banned substance. I think it's the third across 2 different sports.
But that's the explanation.
First of all, I'm relieved more than anything, but of course I'm angry as well because it's cost me so much. The most important thing is it cost me the chance to beat AJ. Everything else after that is secondary, but you know it's a mix of emotions. I'm angry and I'm disappointed as well because people in this game don't give you a chance to prove yourself. Everybody is quick to say yeah, instead of giving people a chance. Well, when you've tested positive more than once, more than twice for a banned substance, what do you expect people to say?
What do you think the attitude's gonna be?
I'm not altruistic, by the way. I'm not standing on my soapbox harping about boxing's revolving door policy when it comes to banned substances. I'm fully aware of it, and I'm used to it by now. I'm indifferent. I'm not going to lie, said Dillian White. It was depressing, and I was heartbroken. When you know you're innocent, and it's some bullshit story, when you're going through everything and spending loads of money and time losing sleep and thinking about it constantly, what did I do? Where did I eat? Where did I go? I was in Portugal, America, I was in the UK, I was all over the place. I was in London for the press conference. I was trying to piece together everything and trying to break everything down and going over it, over and over again. What did I eat that was out of the normal? What did I drink? Where did I eat? Where did I go? It was just depressing. It was like Groundhog Day, every day, going over and over, trying to piece things together, and then everything was coming up blank.
They must have wanted him to retrace his steps to figure out where the banned substance might have come from. What did he consume?
At least that's the story. I remember hearing something very similar in reference to the Mexican soccer team, all of which tested positive for a banned substance, and that's what they had to do. They had to try to retrace their steps to see where the contaminated meat may have come from.
He's coming back at a good time.
There's money to make, and we all know there's supposed to be a Matchroom versus Queensberry show set to go down this summer in Saudi, headlined by Better Beef versus Bivol.
If they get a tune-up fight for this guy in a jiffy, he can maybe make that show.
Maybe. Dillian White continued, they tested more than 45 things I used during camp. Supplements, toothpaste, shampoo, deodorant, everything. I'm a private person and I had to open up my whole life to the investigation. To clear your name, that is the most important thing, and that's what we've done. It costs a lot and it's stressful. It's stressful when you're pumping out money and you're coming back with no return, but because I knew I was innocent, it was a matter of keeping on, persevering, and restoring my reputation, which wasn't really that great to begin with. White is seeking damages from the U.S. company that manufactured the supplement, an additional legal process that delayed him from confirming the findings of the investigation earlier.
So here's what it is. I'm not altruistic. I'm glad to see Dillian White is back. I think there's some very good fights out there for him. Perhaps a Daniel Dubois fight or a Joe Joyce fight.
You know that I half expected that when he comes back, he might come back under the Sky Sports and Boxer banner, but he's gotten himself a Texas license. And Boxer, they don't do shows in America, let alone Texas. So that leads me to believe that, I don't know, maybe he's about to have a tune-up fight in Texas?
I don't know, is Matchroom doing any shows in Texas?
Is anybody doing any shows in Texas in the near future? Because that could tell us a lot. The money for Dillian White is in the UK domestic boxing scene. I mean, it really is. The biggest fights out there for him are against his fellow Brits. And if he squeezes in a tune-up fight in the near future, he can make it to some of those fights as early as the summer.
I'd be happy to see it.
Because I'm not disingenuous, because I'm not an altruist, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm angry.
Fully aware of boxing's revolving door policy when it comes to doping fiascos.
And the same way I can watch Tyson Fury have a fight is the same way I can watch Dillian White have a fight.
In spite of previous anti-doping fiascos.
Forgive me if I'm curt.